Atari Karts, released in 1995 for the Atari Jaguar video game system courtesy of developers Miracle Designs, is a kart racing game that you would presume is similar in vein to that Super Mario Kart game, which was the new hotness at the time. Except Atari Karts is less focused on the vehicular combat aspect of the game and more so on the actual racing with a roster of some of the most unappealing and generic looking mascot characters ever conceived. I mean, you call this Atari Karts, which makes me assume that this is a collection of Atari's various mascot characters, but the only character I recognize in that vein is Bentley Bear from the old Crystal Castles game. Now, to be fair, Atari never really had a formal mascot to represent their brand, but even in the days of Jack Tramiel-owned Atari Corporation, you had a few options. The kid and his dog from Scrapyard Dog could be one, or two for that matter. The kid from Food Fight could be another, Major Havoc. What, you couldn't even put in Atarian crackshot pilot Trevor McFucking-Fur in the game? Try a little cross-promotion with your other Jaguar titles that nobody's playing? Okay, whatever, never mind. Who cares? Anyways. So Atari Karts, obviously, is a kart racer. You pick a difficulty. Well, at first you played beginner because that's the only option available. The rest has to be unlocked. And then you play through the other cups and such. The races themselves are pretty standard fare. Run 5 laps around a closed circuit, vying for first place while avoiding hazards and picking up temporary power-ups that will either boost your speed, improve your steering, or maybe get hit with power downs that will have a negative effect on your kart, also for the short term. Again, it's easy to look at this at first glance and assume this is full-blown Mario Kart ripoff game, and that's not really the case because there's no sense of vehicular mayhem. There are pickups, but those are mostly to temporarily improve or inhibit your chances of winning a race. This is just a fairly simplistic, fairly straightforward kart racing game. And not a particularly exciting one if I'm being honest. I mean, credit where it's due, the gameplay for whatever it's worth is fairly solid. Controlling the karts feels fairly smooth and responsive. I have no issues in that regard, but generally speaking, forcing the player to play through every difficulty mode to unlock further ones is a bit of a chore, especially when the first loop is more than likely going to be brain-dead winners. The game does have 2-player multiplayer actions, which is something I guess, and also kind of standard. I don't know what else people were expecting. People were complaining that this wasn't 4 players or something like that, but I don't know. Was anyone really clamoring for that at the time? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Whatever. There is an option where you could choose to play flat tracks or tracks with hills, which adds a couple bumps here and there, which is something, I guess. Really pushing that 64-bit power, allegedly. By the way, these karts drive on the water. They don't sink. They float on the surface. I guess that's where all the 64 bits went into. Oh well. Atari Karts does sport some impressive Mode 7-like effects. I mean, that was the general idea, was to make something similar to the other game, and for what it's worth, the scaling and the steering is fairly smooth, perhaps more so than on the SNES, which shouldn't be a surprise considering this is supposed to be superior hardware, and if you're not pulling off better Mode 7-like effects, there's something seriously wrong. Other than that, the karts look alright if not a bit generic, ditto on the tracks. A lot of them tend to look a bit samey and lack that spark or imagination that you'd figured would be evident in a kart racer featuring a bunch of glorified cartoons. Sound is also a bit of a mixed bag. You've got some rather pleasant sounding but otherwise uninspired and pretty forgettable music playing on each of the tracks. There's some sound effects that sound decent enough but nothing too exciting. It also would have been nice if the karts you drove sounded more like driving a cart and not mowing the lawn. Unless there's a hidden lawn mowing mode that I don't know about, in which case, make that the whole game instead. That would have been something different at least. Overall, Atari Karts is a more than competent kart racing game on the Atari Jaguar, and that's about all you can really say about it. And if you're longing for such a game on your cat console of choice, then it's a more than adequate addition to the collection, and it's certainly no harm in sampling on the Atari 50 collection. But this one doesn't really do anything special, nor is there anything that hasn't been done better elsewhere. Not a bad game per se, just a largely unmemorable one.